there appears to be two effects. One effect is that some people have taken and learned from the madness, and they want to live life and move on. But some people have tried to stir the pot, have tried to make a conflict, have tried to, make a bad thing worse. And so I think that has been tragic. For some people learn to forgive and to walk away and move on. My grandmother, I never heard her state a position, but I think the term, you play the cards that are dealt you, fits my grandmother Sina, very, very well, because, okay, I've got 3 boys and 4 girls. The oldest one's 15, the youngest one's 2. What am I going to do? Am I going to die? Am I going to jump off a cliff? No, she just went ahead with life, and she lived her life. And if you look at the lives of all of her children, turned out to be a pretty good family. All of them turned out to be a pretty good, honorable bunch. And so she handled it that way. I can't speak to the McBrides. I can't speak to the Wootons. When my grandfather Martin Kempton was killed in the shootout, my dad was 13 years of age. To help with the finances of the home, my dad caught a freight train, unbeknownst to the freight train people, caught a freight train down to Globe, Miami, and went to work in the copper mines as a hard rock miner. He sent everything but room and board for himself back to his mother to help with the family finances. Regardless of that part of growing up hard, he was angry. He hated the Power boy, especially Tom Power, who was the one who said, I shot through the window. I'm the one that shot Martin Kempton. At age 19, the Mormon church called this boy to go on a mission. My dad he was not hysterical. He just couldn't imagine that anybody could ask a boy to leave his widowed mother with his family and go and serve somewhere else. It didn't make sense to him, but his mother insisted that he go, and because of his mother's influence, he went ahead and went. While he was on the mission, he was reading in the New Testament in the 5th chapter of Matthew, and it says, basically, paraphrasing, in olden times, it was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, you are to forgive. Forgive your brother. Pray for those that deceitfully use you. And he came to the conclusion that it meant him. It didn't talk about Jerusalem and the apostles. It meant him, that he had to forgive. That's what the message he took from it. He decided, after further study about forgiveness, that he would go and forgive the man that shot his father. He returned to Arizona. He got somewhat of an education, sufficiently that he could have a teaching certificate. And he married my mother. They got very, very involved, but within a relatively few years, he was in Phoenix, and on their return trip home, he just said, Catherine, he said, would you mind if I stop by the prison today? And she knew the story, and she said sure. And so they drove over to the prison. He went up the prison steps and went into the warden's office and said, I'd like to see Tom Powers. And the warden looked at him very directly, right in the face, just kind of like sizing him up. And he just made a determination that he could trust him. And so he says, I think that can be arranged. A guard was dispatched down in the prison, brought Tom Powers back. They were in a small interview room with a wooden table in the middle of it. Tom sat on one side, my dad sat on the other side, and they talked for over an hour. And they went through all the details of the shootout. They discussed the whole thing. And when there was nothing left for either of them to say, when they were both run out, my dad stood and extended his hand across the table, and Tom took it. And Tom stood and took my dad's hand, and my dad, in essence, said, this is a terrible, terrible thing that has come into our lives. He said, I have been deprived of a father and his association and his love and teaching. You have been deprived of your life. in this stinking, rotten prison. But regardless of how it's shaken out, I forgive you. And at that, everything was silent as could be. My dad and Tom broke the handclasp. My dad looked at the guard outside. The guard opened the door, and my dad went out the prison and went down to the car, and my mother and dad drove home. I learned within the last week that there was a man in the prison who was doing, in essence, prison ministries. His name is Stan Turley. Stan Turley said that he was working with prisoners at that time, and he said that after Glenn had come to the prison and had that discussion with Tom, he said there was a difference in Tom and John. John was not part of the interview, but he said there seemed to be more of a at rest or at peace, or not, that there was less anger inside of them after that had taken place. This is the lesser side of me. I'm disturbed when people distort the facts for whatever purposes they have. That disturbs me, for them to twist. It is what it is. 6 men died that day. Maybe the Powers didn't die for another 50 years, but they still died. They lost their lives. And I've been in the prison. I know what the prisons is like. It is hell. It is just, and it's worse than that. It is unimaginable what goes on and what happens in the prison. Not just the loss of your freedom, but just, the degradation of humanity in the prisons is just phenomenal, astronomical. Well, when people, for whatever motives they have, play off of that and twist it, it does disturb me. But, it's a waste of time to be disturbed about something you can do nothing about. So you try and walk away from it. You try the best you can to walk away.